Today we're going to focus all of our time on looking at the powers that the President of the United States has. So we'll be exploring all the powers that are in the Constitution. We're going to categorize these powers. We're going to talk about different ways that the President can influence policy and things like that. What we see here in the picture, this is Barack Obama giving a State of the Union address. Since it is mentioned in the Constitution, this is a formal responsibility of the President. It gives the President a great opportunity to lay out an agenda for the legislature for the year. All right, what we want to do today, our objective, we want to be able to describe all of the powers of the presidency. We're going to go through some formal and some informal powers, but we want to describe these powers of the presidency because we need to be able to explain how the president interacts with other policymakers. So we need to be able to explain how the president interacts with Congress, with the courts, and with the federal bureaucracy. So we'll be answering today, we'll be looking at the big question of what powers the president has. We're going to start today by looking at the formal powers of the president. So when we say formal powers, we're talking about what are the things that are written in the Constitution. Those are the formal powers of the president. One of those, what we see in the picture here, we see President Trump meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And so, negotiating treaties, making agreements with other world leaders, an example of one of the many formal powers that we're going to go through. What we're going to do first today is we're going to not take the powers that the president has in order, but we're going to put them into different groups. We're going to group them as executive, legislative, judicial, and foreign policy powers. First, let's take a look at the president's executive powers. The very first thing it says there, this is our definition of executive power. The president has the power to carry out the law. The president makes a lot of decisions about how the law is going to get implemented, how the words of the law are translated into action and have effects on people. So this is the responsibility of the president. They have a tremendous influence over the policy in this way. So for the president, they make a lot of decisions about how to carry out the law. One of the examples we've looked at already might involve illegal drug enforcement. So if the president is deciding how that law gets carried out, the president can make decisions like prioritize enforcement of marijuana laws, or a president could make a decision like prioritize enforcement of heroin laws. So the decisions that the president makes about how the law gets implemented have huge effects on what the law means for us. The president can also issue rules and regulations and instructions for government agencies. This is what we call executive orders. So since the president, we mentioned yesterday, the president is in charge of all of the bureaucracy, the president gets to make rules about how the bureaucracy operates. And through using this power, they have tremendous influence over the actual effects of the laws. And the other thing the president does is the president prepares the proposal and has final say over the budget passed by Congress. So the president can, while they can't control the budget alone, they have tremendous influence over what the priorities of the federal budget are. So they can, for example, request increased funding for environmental protection, or they could request decreased military spending or things like that. So they have tremendous influence over what laws get made by using their executive powers. So here, these executive powers, mostly it's about implementing the law. So the president has the ability to carry out the law. They can issue executive orders, which would be rules and regulations for the different bureaucratic agencies, and the president has some influence, a lot of influence over the federal budget. The president also has a tremendous amount of legislative power. We mentioned yesterday we would call the president the chief legislator. Those powers derive from these powers we find in the Constitution. The first of these, the most important, would be that the president recommends legislation to Congress. One of the big opportunities for the president to recommend legislation to Congress takes place at the State of the Union address. The president outlines their plans for the following year and typically suggest or at least point out some issues that they want Congress to deal with. In some cases, they suggest actual policies that they want Congress to make. When the president proposes legislation, they're then able to put pressure on Congress to do what they want. The president has a better ability to reach the public and influence the public's opinion. So the president can say, I want Congress to do this. Then the president can speak to the public, and the public puts pressure on Congress to do what the president has recommended. Other powers that the president has include the president can call special sessions of Congress. So like if there's an emergency that the president needs Congress to pass some legislation to fix, the president can call Congress into session, say, hey, I need you to get here and do this. I need you to get here and solve this problem. The president also has the power to adjourn Congress. The president has never actually used this power, so we don't really know what that would mean. But the president does, according to the Constitution, have the power to send Congress out of session. And of course, the bottom two go together. The president has final say over every law. The president approves every law. So if they like the law that Congress passed, they sign it, and that bill becomes an official law. If they dislike the law that Congress passed, they veto the law, and that law is rejected even though it passed by Congress. These are all the president's legislative powers. They call special sessions, they can adjourn Congress, they sign or veto all law. The most important thing for us to remember here with legislative powers is that the president proposes laws or recommends laws to Congress. Next, the president has a tremendous amount of judicial powers. The president, of course, the most high profile of these is that the president chooses all of the Supreme Court justices. But the president actually has the power to appoint any federal judge at any level. The Supreme Court justices are the ones that get the most attention. There's only 9 of those. They're high-profile people, easy enough for us to learn who they are. But there are hundreds of federal judges all across the country in our 94 different districts. And the president is responsible for appointing all of those judges. Each judge that the president appoints, just like a Supreme Court justice, is appointed for life and keeps that position until they choose to retire or for any other reason vacate the position. So the president has control over who all the judges are at all different levels of the federal courts. But the president also has some powers after the courts have made their decisions. So the president has the power to grant pardons and the power to grant amnesty. A pardon gives a person, an individual person, relief from punishment. So the president can forgive a person from what the court has decided should be their punishment. Amnesty is a blanket or a group pardon. So a blanket pardon for all people that committed a particular crime. For example, during the Vietnam War, several people avoided the military draft, and so they should be punished by the court system. But President Nixon granted amnesty to all of those people who avoided the draft. So it's like one big pardon that covers all people that broke this particular law. The president also has the power to issue commutations, and commutations mean that the president can reduce your punishment. So in the case of like jail time, the president can reduce the amount of time served. In the case of a fine, the president can reduce the amount of money charged, but this allows the president to lessen the punishment. The difference between a pardon and a commutation is a pardon, you are completely forgiven. This crime is gone from your record and everything, and the commutation has the same real effect, like you're done with the punishment, but that punishment, that crime still stays on a person's record. It's like they have completed their punishment. The president also has very important foreign policy powers. These are scattered throughout Article 2, but since the president is one person and Congress is 535 people, it's much better for the president to handle foreign policy. The president can speak with a single voice. The president can make decisions quickly. And so this is why the president has so many foreign policy powers relative to what Congress has. So first of those, the president negotiates treaties with other nations. This is much better for us to use the president instead of Congress for this, because Congress would have so many different, diverse, varying opinions about what the treaty should be like, but the president can speak with a single voice with another world leader, and they can come to an agreement about what should be in the treaty. Congress will still, through the Senate, have the ability to approve that treaty, but only the president can negotiate the details of the treaty. The president also, much like he appoints the judges, the president appoints all the ambassadors to the different countries around the world. So any country where we have exchanged embassies, we have an embassy in their country, they have an embassy in ours, the president appoints the ambassadors to those. An ambassador is a person who works in that country and helps handle day-to-day relationships between the United States and in that country, like especially for like U.S. citizens visiting there and things like that. Helps with day-to-day stuff like passports and visas and all that. But the president appoints all the ambassadors, so that gives the president a ton of influence over how foreign policy gets made in each of these countries. And the president also has the power of diplomatic recognition. When the president receives ambassadors from another country, the president is officially recognizing the legitimate representatives of another country's government. So this gives the president a lot of power to decide which governments of foreign states are the legitimate governments as far as the United States is concerned. So the United States, like if in a different country there were some kind of civil disruption, like a revolution or something like that, we had two different groups who were claiming to be the rightful government of that country. The president of the United States is the person who will make the decision about which group we support here in the United States, which group we will deal with and have regular relationships with. And of course, you guys know the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. This is an important foreign policy power because this gives the president control over the military. When to use the military, the president can make decisions about strikes against a different country, maybe airstrikes or maybe using troops on the ground. But all these decisions are up to the president to make. And so together, the treaty power, the ambassador power, the recognition power, and the commander-in-chief power give the president a ton of influence over America's relationships with different countries. Finally, the president has a ton of administrative powers. Now, remember, administration, we're talking about day-to-day business of the government. This is where the president is acting like the manager of the United States government. Among these important powers, first, we'd say that the president appoints all of the heads of the cabinet departments. So the president picks the people to be in charge of all the different specialized departments. This is really important, gives the president a lot of influence over how that department will behave over the next 4 years. The president also has the power to request written opinions or advice or just a report on any topic from any administrative officials. So the president can request that the Secretary of Education investigate something and report back to the president to help the president and that secretary and the entire cabinet create policy or find different solutions to policy problems. So requesting written opinions of different officials can mean that the president is ordering investigations and ordering different reports to be made. Now, outside of the cabinet, the president also appoints officials to run a wide variety of bureaucratic agencies. They're not all cabinet departments, but the president has a lot of influence over these departments. This way, the president can appoint people to run different agencies like environmental protection or the Center for Disease Control. The president appoints the person to run the post office and all sorts of different government agencies, and this gives the president a lot of power to influence how those agencies are run. The people who are going to be in charge of each agency owe their position to the president and tend to be willing to listen to what the president says. And finally, we have our take care clause. Remember, it's up to the president to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. So this goes along with executive power just a little bit, but it's up to the president to make sure that that these laws are put into action. And so it's up to the president to oversee the administration of the whole United States government to make sure that laws are put into action and that policies are carried out. So those are not the only powers of the president. Those are the formal powers, meaning those are the things that are specifically listed in the Constitution. So we'll go on and explore some different powers that the president has. We'll look at his relationships with other branches and things like that, but then we'll get into some specific informal powers that the president has as well.